two other dreamers and doers to know. So first I'll introduce Superintendent Steve King. Before becoming superintendent, Superintendent Steve King was the assistant superintendent of Cottonwood Oak Creek School District. This is his 30th year as a homegrown Arizona educator. Superintendent King was trained as a breakthrough coach, which empowered him to focus on the focus, ensuring strong classroom instructional strategies were implemented with fidelity. He prioritizes spending time in the classroom, coaching teachers, and building positive relationships with students. Steve enjoys working collaboratively with his school team to provide students with conditions for positive outcomes. Mr. King is passionate about creating educational environments that support the whole child. A strong focus on providing social emotional support for children with traumatic backgrounds, and intrinsic special needs so that they may succeed in the educational environment. He knows providing support for students with the most significant needs allows all students the ability to learn, to grow, and to thrive in the classroom. So thank you for being here with us, Mr. King. And another dreamer and doer, and our co-keynote for the morning is Dr. Leslie Anway. Leslie is the director of the Resilient Schools for the Pima County School Superintendent's Office. She is a nationally certified school psychologist and a certified clinical trauma specialist. Leslie notes her greatest certification is being a grandmother to 3 amazing grandchildren. With nearly 30 years of experience in education, Leslie has emerged her experience as a scientist and a practitioner to advocate for whole child, healing-centered school environments that prioritize space for staff wellness. Leslie is an Arizona and national speaker and trainer on trauma, social emotional learning, and the integration and implementation of practice for proactive frameworks of support into school climate and culture. One of Dr. Anaway's greatest strengths is facilitating systems change. That's a needed skill for sure, through connection building and meaningful learning opportunities that provide innovative avenues for sustainability. So we have 60 years of expert opinion coming at us this morning. I appreciate that they are both here facilitating systems change and supporting us and learning how to do that as well. So thanks again to both Leslie and Steve. We look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Awesome. Well, welcome everybody. And just to make sure first, can everybody see our slides? Are we good on the slides?
Yes,
yes,
I see them.
yes. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Yes. So today, Steve and I will be talking about connection building and recharge as springboards for systems change. So before we jump in, I do like to start out with just a minute of presence to set the tone, because we all are human beings and we spend 99.9% of our time in the human doing aspect of our lives. And we don't take that time to really slow down and just be present. And so taking this minute just to be intentionally present, and we're just going to do 1 minute. So I just want to invite you to participate in whatever way feels comfortable to you, to just stop, just slow those thousands of thoughts that are constantly circulating around in your brain and future and past, and just be present. So if you want screens on or off and eyes closed or open, but let's just take a minute to be present. And I'm going to go ahead and start that minute right now. All right, and that is 1 minute. So hopefully you were able to just inherently maybe tap into some of that calm that is within when we are present, that's already within you, that calm, there's some joy that's in there. So just when we are able to stop the thoughts that are constantly there, we can tap into that. And also tap into this, the strength of this collective community that we have gathered with us this morning. And speaking of that, let's see who we've got here with us this morning. And Sandy, yep, thank you. We're going to go ahead and launch this poll here and see who we've got in the collective space with us. So, all right, so it looks like we've got some school mental health professionals, behavioral health, one administrator so far.
There's a lot of others there.
Others, yep. District personnel. Yeah, I think we've got more others than anything else. It's good to be an other. Yeah. One teacher. All right, we got a teacher here. All right, so we're kind of split. We're across the board here, but we've got a lot who fall in the other category. We've got some people who work with the youth supporting agencies, some behavioral health, a dash of district personnel and of administrators and teachers, and then we've got some school mental health professionals. So that kind of helps us know who's in the room here with us. We do want to acknowledge all of you and acknowledge that if you're working with youth in any capacity, that these past couple of years have not been easy. So we just want to put that acknowledgement out here. We also want to acknowledge you for taking the time to be here with us today, to engage in these conversations that we're having today, because they're pretty critical. And we want to just give you a quick, just a little moment of applause. And so that was my little applause there that I've got on the screen. But I don't know if I've got the sound working. So I don't know if you all can hear it. Can you hear that?
Unfortunately, we can't.
You couldn't. Okay. You know what? I'm going to have to unshare and reshare because I need to share my sound. So I apologize for that. I need to stop share and reshare.
Leslie, I'm going to share the results of the poll just so everybody sees real quick while you're doing that.
Thank you.
Who's here?
Okay. Thank you. All right.
Split. Leslie, we're seeing your split screen with the slide and your email.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Third time is a charm. There we go. Is that it?
There we go. Yep.
Okay.
Looks good.
Awesome. All right. And there's the results of the poll so everyone can see it. There's our little acknowledgement. All right. So as we move into this discussion about systems change, and which is a really big, broad topic, I think. So I think that this quote from Martin Luther King is pretty appropriate. So you don't have to see the whole staircase. You just have to take the first step. And I will now pass it over to Steve to talk a little bit about the need behind educational systems change.
Wow, thank you, Leslie. And for those of you who don't know Leslie, she's terrific. We got to meet for the first time, I don't know, what, 6 months ago, maybe, or at least talk on the phone, and the work that you're doing down there. I don't know. We go back a little ways anyway, but I'm very grateful to be here with you all. I can't really see you all, but I did see that Martha Horton is on this, and she is one of our counselors, so she's gonna keep me honest, which isn't too hard usually, as far as those go along. But Martha is she's absolutely terrific, wonderful counselor who was brought here with a grant, and she came over to us having much experience in our local mental health provider. And she's a beautiful human being inside and out. And the bottom line is she's great for kids. And I've seen her help a lot of kids, which is kind of what we're all doing, just sitting here, right? But you talked, can you go back one slide again? Because that quote, it finally just hit me. Martin Luther King. Yeah.
Yes.
Just go back one if you would. There you go. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Right? Is there anything more than that? You know, so often I know myself, and I can only speak from my own experience. We get bogged down and you can't see the forest for the trees, or can't see the trees for the forest, however that saying goes right there. But it also just means we have to take that first, bold step. You know, when I was a kid, when I was a teenager, I'm going to date myself again. My favorite song, or one of my favorite songs anyway, or my favorite group was a group called Van Halen. Some of you may recall them, but with the David Lee Roth version, right? When he had the song "Jump," you might as well just jump. And I think that's kind of something that, fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes good and bad, we've done, and I've done in my own life, just jumping into stuff, and you never know what you're going to get. And my whole process with this, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm going to try not to talk really fast. Usually I talk really fast and people say you need to slow down. So this is my first keynote I've ever done. So please grant me some grace if you would. So I'm going to try to slow down. But my whole process began about 23 years ago. And then, like you said, I was in schools 30 years and down in Phoenix, but I moved up to the Verde Valley about 23 years ago. And I wanted to get out of Phoenix and slow down. I didn't want to be a principal anymore. I wanted less responsibility. I just want to go back to teaching and just enjoy those things in the classroom like I used to. And one thing led to another. I ended up as superintendent. But upon moving up to the Verde Valley, it was a little bit of a culture shock, right? I moved up here from Maybury. You know, you think back to the Andy Griffith Show, a little quieter, sedate, kind of slowing down a little bit. And it is a beautiful place. It's filled with wonderful people, but there definitely is a large population here that I was a little bit surprised by when I moved here, of children and families and it's not too strong of a word, in desperate need. And it took me a long time, probably close to 10 years or maybe more, to actually have some context for seeing and to understand what we're seeing with a lot of the children that we serve up here. And I'm sure it's the same across the state, urban, rural, suburban. The challenges are maybe a little bit different. The names, of course, are different, but the challenges remain the same of what we're seeing with our children. But after about 10 years up here, I had a friend named Erin Mabry who came to me and she says, "Hey, have you ever heard of ACEs before?" And I said, like cards or something? She says, no, the adverse childhood experiences. And that really kind of opened my eyes and kind of gave me that understanding for what we were seeing, to put these things into the understanding, because I knew that we had a lot of kids that are coming from very tragic circumstances. I can't tell you how many funerals I've gone to from suicides of students, substance abuses, broken and breaking families, you name it. You know, I think I don't know how many ACEs there are now. There's probably an infinite number of ACEs out there, but it really gave me an understanding to say, okay, well, maybe we should be looking at how we can address these issues and maybe move on past that so we can get to some other issues in the main function of our schools, which is educating children. So I do believe, and I think you'll see a slide later on, if we don't deal with these things, we're gonna have to deal with them at some point. And if not us, then who? So if you can go ahead and advance a little bit now, Leslie, that'd be great. And so me being a superintendent, I guess I'm in charge of systems. And systems do not come naturally for me. For those, Ms. Horton will tell you the same. And I am so glad that she's on this. I tend to fly by the seat of my pants and just jump into things. But after you get into a situation and a position of responsibility, you got to build those systems because you want something that's going to last once you're gone. And I think that's always, especially after 30 years and the older you get, you start thinking about those things. I didn't used to think about those at all, but more and more. But what systems are we creating? What conditions are we putting into place? And that's really the job, is creating those conditions and those systems where we can actually address those needs of what we're seeing with children. Because if you don't address them, they're going to come back to you. So did you have a poll here or something? Leslie, I'm not seeing the bottom of our slides. So I'm not seeing the Mentimeters. I just want to make sure that I get those correct, because I'm really
so I do want to give a heads up to everybody, because our presentation is filled with QR codes. And so if you have your phones out, that's fabulous, because And totally optional, but just like this slide, if you want more information on this, if you want the actual article that this came from, scan the QR code. So those will be, we're not going to put links in the chat for you, but we're going to have lots of QR codes for you to scan just for extra information. So that's what most of these are, is just scan them for extra information. The Mentimeters you'll also need to scan too, so you can have your phones ready for those.
Great. Thank you, Leslie. So if you see that quote right there, that statement, the mental health of our children has been declared a national emergency. I don't think that is hyperbole at all. I think that is too soft of a statement, if anything. And I think when people are putting up there the statements of what does a resilient school or what does a trauma-informed school look like, and all those words I saw coming up there, and they're all so true. I said, but I thought to myself, the first thing is that the first word that comes to mind anyway is honest. And I don't know if we always do that as a society or as a culture, that we're honest. And I think if I was being honest, and again, this is my perspective, I think it is beyond a national emergency of what we're seeing with our children. You'll see some stuff later on about how Finland did some stuff, and we looked at some stuff back in 1983, which is 40 years ago, by the way. But are we honest with what we are seeing with our children and what we are seeing on a daily basis? And I think Ms. Horton would let you know that I don't spend a whole lot of time in my office. I get out there and I see children on a regular basis every single day, if I can, because that's where it belongs. So I'm not sitting up on high and just making these determinations, but I am living this as you all are as well. The crisis that we are seeing with our children is growing exponentially and has accelerated in the last 10 years beyond belief. Now, before we were taking our moment of silence, and I want you to be honest, if that's the word we're going to use, honest, and that's the word I'm going to use, how many of you during that minute took out your cell phone and checked your email just real quick, or checked your text, right? Or whatever it is that you checked, Facebook status or Instagram or all that stuff. And you think about our children, and my understanding is that one of the major responses that our local mental health professionals go to families and homes for is when children their phones are taken away for whatever reason, causing a crisis in these children's lives, right? These phones, I'm not blaming it all on the phones, right? They're merely a symptom of everything. But we are in a state of crisis, much of it exacerbated by our connectedness. And there's another slide here later on about the loneliness crisis, right? We're so connected. I can call anybody anytime. I can send them a text anytime. Well, if I did Snapchat and InstaChat or Instagram or whatever that is, then I'd be able to do those things. But we can connect at any time, but are we really connecting? But I think this is the primary slide that we need to think about. The mental health of our children has been declared a national emergency. I think it's beyond that point, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. So the next slide, please, Leslie. All right, I'm going to move this. So a consequence of this, too, is the pandemic. Now, I had the fortune and the grace to be the superintendent of the Cottonwood Oak Creek School District for the last 7 years, which includes the pandemic. And I will tell you, I never thought that we would see anything like what we saw during the pandemic. It was certainly the most challenging time of myself for personally, but also professionally, because although we all have personal stuff going on, we all carry burdens, we all carry rocks in our backpack, as this one fella presented on that I saw sometime, all those challenges that we're facing. I also had the responsibility of trying to guide, with a lot of help from a lot of people, this district through the pandemic. And we did have a lot of help from a lot of kind-hearted and well-meaning people. But it caused a lot of stress in people's lives, whether you think it was real or think it was fake, or whether it was something or was nothing. It didn't make any difference. And trying to find that middle ground, that reasonable ground where we can find some place of agreement and prioritizing the well-being of children, but at the same time also respecting and understanding what we are seeing with our adults. If our adults aren't healthy, guess what? Our children are not going to be healthy. If you see the contentiousness of adults, no wonder we're seeing contentiousness amongst our children. How many times you go out to eat, everybody uses this, and you see a family of 4, family of 5 out there, and they all got their cell phones. I took my dad to Outback a couple weeks ago, and of course, that's what I tune into, is people around, right? But you know what? Guess who else was on their cell phone? Me, right? I was not as connected with my father at that time that I could have been, and I need to cherish those moments because my father is 86 years old, right? But think about it with those children. But if we can't keep our educators healthy, if our educators are not well, if our educators are stressed, if our educators, and by educators, I mean bus drivers, I mean paraprofessionals, I mean counselors, I mean teachers, I mean principals, assistant principals, everybody in our systems, right? That's our approach. If we can't create the conditions where they have health, how do we expect them with our children? So you look at the long hours, right? Yeah, there's a lot of long hours. The ripple effects of political polarization. I think it's safe to say that we can all agree, whatever side of the political spectrum, or if you don't have a side, that we are a highly polarized society and a highly polarized country right now. Loss of planning time due to sub and full-time shortages. 6,000 plus teachers in the state of Arizona openings this past year. Subs, I can't find a sub to save my life. And the ones that we do have, God bless them and thank him for everything. But we have a very hard time. Bus drivers, everybody's mad at me now because they can't get transportation to all the games and everything else. And so I hand them an application saying, go ahead and sign up. Well, I don't want to do that. Well, I don't know what to tell you then, sir. Lack of professional autonomy. I think that probably happens in a lot of places, but I do respect people's autonomy here. And I think that's important to have that sense of agency, that I have control of at least what I have control over. And I'm also being listened to, right? You'll see a slide in here about being seen. And I saw someone else putting that there and recognizing things. Pressure to keep teachers all on the same curriculum pacing, even more difficult since the pandemic, because we got kids all over the place. Kids moved all over the place. Kids and families were challenged. We look at our homeless populations, the price of housing, all those things that we know about have contributed to this effect as well. And the inability to meet our own basic needs. How can I take care of a classroom with 30 kids when my mom is sick? Or I'm worried about my own children. I'm worried about my own health. I need to go check and the results of my mammogram didn't come back as I would have hoped. All those things are contributing factors to those levels of stress that all of our educators are facing out there. So next slide, please, Ms. Leslie. All right, teacher burnout and attrition is a serious problem indeed. So worse well-being than other working adults? Well, I don't know about that, but maybe. Worse is always relative, especially poor Hispanic mid-career teachers and female teachers and principals. 90% of our teachers are females. All of our principals are females, by the way. So there is a definite stress out there. The behaviors that we're seeing from the children, the lack of parental support, actually the opposite of support, which is open antagonism on the part of many families right now, blaming educators for this or that. And I refuse to accept that, by the way, and I push back on that at every opportunity. Teachers and education and schools should be praised for the line that they held, especially during the pandemic, and not be accused of all these different things that they're being accused of for political purposes. In many ways, we are doing the absolute best that we can, and I think they deserve a medal. I think a lot of people do. Poor well-being and adverse working conditions associated with teachers' intentions to leave their jobs. Turnovers like it is, especially in a rural environment. I'm sure it happens as well in urban. I'm not discounting any urban experiences as well. But in the rural environment where I work in, it is very difficult to attract teachers here. But the average cost of a house is $350,000. If you can find one, apartments are almost near non-existent. Where are they going to live? And we're doing things about that, but it makes it tough to attract people to our environment. Time spent on non-teaching or non-administrative duties, time not built on positive adult relationships. 100% report burnout and 90% do is a problem. And 55% consider leaving the profession within the next 5 years. Had this been done, this survey, this poll, in the middle of the pandemic, I would have been amongst that 55%. There were many days that I woke up saying, what the am I doing here? Right? Beating your head up against a wall. I'm sure you felt that before. Not making the progress. Having little emails sent to you by somebody, possibly a parent or somebody else, not really being encouraging, but rather discouraging. All those have contributed to this. So, Leslie, next one, please. And let me know when yours is next, because I can't see the slide numbers. I'm trying. I have to keep moving this around. So 68% who express concerns over their personal, social, emotional, and mental health. Yeah, I'm in that 68% right there too, just to let you know. I think it'd be safe to say that anybody who's plugged in, who's involved in the wars and the fight out there, in the arena, as one of my favorite quotes says, the credit belongs to the person in the arena. You're always challenged. You always question if you're an introspective person. I think educators by nature are introspective people. And educators by nature are caring people. Otherwise, we wouldn't go into this. And because of the caring, it also takes a toll on our own well-being because we get attached to those that we care about and those that we love, who are our teachers and our colleagues especially. So that number should not be surprising to anybody. Is that pretty accurate, Leslie? I can't hear you.
Yes, that's accurate. Yeah,
and you are up, I think,
segues
now.
really well. into this, and you are up for this one as well.
Right? Loneliness. The more we're connected, it seems the more lonely we get. Loneliness is now considered a global epidemic. A third of us don't interact with our neighbors. And you should have a poll on that, Leslie, right there. How many of you went over and said hey to your neighbors recently, right? I hollered at mine across the way. We have a little bit of bigger property. I mean, I guess I could go for a walk, but I do holler at them pretty regular. A quarter of us report we haven't made a new friend in 5 years. Yeah, I don't think that's accurate for me. But loneliness is as bad for our health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And the good news, the antidote is relationships and connection. And we all have the capacity to make a determined effort to connect with others. So I've got a friend, an old friend from high school, actually, that I've maintained contact with. And he is a friend. And he lives long ways away now. But he's on Facebook and he's got like 600 or 700 friends. And for some of you, it seems like a lot to me, I guess, but some of you may have even more than that, right? And I called him the other day and he picked the phone right away. He says, I always know what you call him. And you know why he always knows that it's me calling? Because I'm the only one who calls him, right? So on digital paper, we have 600, 700, 800, 1,000 friends, whatever that is. But are they really our friends? And by his nature, he wants to reach out. He wants to be social, and he feels as though the avenue towards that is digital, right? I've got all these friends. I'm making an impact and having these things out there. But is that really what a friend is? And somebody told me one time, a long time ago, that, and you stole my line, Leslie, and I love that you did. And he says, we're not human doings, we're human beings, right? We are being, and our experience here is with other people and our relationships. There is nothing more important than the relationships we can build. And you can't do it over Facebook. And I tell people in our district, well, I sent an email. I said, no, I said, pick up the phone. Better is just go and have a conversation with the person. Too often we think relationship building is sending those emails, is having a bunch of friends. And this is all stuff that you all know, and I'm sure you've all heard it before as well. But I think it's a good reminder for all of us that in today's world, I mean, everybody sends a text, right? And sometimes those texts are good, right? Here's a good thing. But if you really need to have a hard conversation with somebody, or even not so hard conversation, reach out to that person and hear their voice. You know, texting and email only goes so far. And here's another thing too for young administrators out there. If you're thinking about sending an email when you're a little bit mad, don't ever do that. A friend of mine told me one time that email is good for information, but not for communication. And I think there's a key difference between those things right there. But the only way we're going to break out of our loneliness and get connected once again is to build those. And that was even harder during the pandemic, right? And Zoom, I'm telling you, I was asked this with Leslie, oh, this keynote speech is on a Zoom. And I said, really? That's kind of tough because it's hard to connect with you. I can only see one face, and that's Angie Burleson right now, and it seems kind of frozen. I do see Leslie nodding a lot, and that helps, to be honest with you, and smiling. But that's all I see of you. I would like to see more of you, and I would have liked to have spoken in person, but I'll take whatever I can get. I'm honored to be here. Next slide.
All right, and let me just add on to this, because this whole loneliness research came out when the U.S. Surgeon General put his report out, which happened within the last several months. But just last month, the World Health Organization, or WHO, as we commonly refer to it, kind of added on to this, and they declared loneliness to be a global pressing threat. So I just think that's good to acknowledge that, because it's not just in the United States. So this report came out that was really referencing what's happening within our country, but it's happening worldwide. So this sense of disconnection, this loneliness issue, it transcends borders. It's not just our country.
Do you think there's a connection between the epidemic of mental health and the previous slide and loneliness, right?
Well, it's like chicken or the egg.
Causation,
right?
correlation, all that stuff, but I figure there probably is.
Right. Yeah. So here's that slide that you were talking about coming up here. That either we spend time meeting our kids and our staff, our adults as well, their emotional needs, or we're going to spend that time dealing with the behaviors caused from their unmet needs. Either way, we spend the time. So looking at those proactive things. So we're going to go ahead and move now into, okay, we've seen that there's some need. We know we need to change some things in our educational systems, but how? So where do we begin? So this is a lot of times where we get hung up on. A lot of us can say, oh yeah, we know change is needed. Change is needed in our educational system, but I'm just one person. And where do I go? And what power do I have? So let's take a look at some of these pieces. So first of all, this graphic, I think, is wonderful. This model was created by FSG, Reimagining Social Change. They are a global nonprofit. They're focused on understanding and promoting social impact around the world. And what they really do is they aim to shift the conditions that hold a system in place by working simultaneously at 3 levels of change. And that's the explicit, which is the top row there that you see, the semi-explicit, which is the middle row, and then the implicit, which is the bottom row. And according to them, real equitable progress requires exceptional attention to the detailed, often mundane work of noticing what is invisible to many. So I really like that quote. And I love all these components of systems change, but especially if you look over to the side, the right-hand side, and you see those bi-directional arrows. So you can see that you're going to see structural change that's bi-directional, but also transformational change. And a lot of times we will get into structural change in our systems, but it's not transformational because we're not getting all the way down into those pieces that really matter. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this later on in the presentation. We'll dig a little deeper into this as we move forward. And Steve, I'll let you talk about this.
I love this. This came from Leslie, of course, but there's one of our classrooms here in our high school. He has a poster on the wall. And it's a real poster, a real photograph of an iceberg, but from multi-levels, right? And it kind of looks like this. And it's absolutely incredible. Everybody hears that, you know, in the Titanic, there's a lot more iceberg below the water than there is above, but holy cow, there's a lot more right there. And if you look at the visible organizational culture, and you say the way we get things done. And so I get to work with somebody named Trish Winters, and she's the executive secretary for the board. And we work very, very closely together on a lot of things. And she is an amazing human being. And a lot of people, she's the organizational genius. A lot of people say, oh, look what you've done. I haven't done anything. I'm surrounded by people a lot smarter than I am. That's not a false humility. I wish it were. But she says, culture eats strategy for breakfast every day. And I know that somebody else came from, had said that as well, right? But you can come up with all these designs. And I love that last graphic you had where it showed the transformational change versus the systems change, right? And you want to do this, you want to do that. And I don't think they're mutually exclusive. They're probably interdependent, or there's that synchronistic, symbiotic. I'm using a lot of big words. I don't really know what they mean, but they work together, right? And that's really how you get there. But you have to have the idea. And I go back to that word again, that honesty. And you have to be honest with what we're seeing. It's not about a dogma. It's like, oh, I have this educational vision and this is what needs to be done. No, it's the circumstances on the ground, in the school, in your classroom, in your office, wherever it is, that you need to be able to look at honestly, to assess. And that means listening to a lot of people, by the way, not just thinking you have all the answers, and then start addressing those things. And I think the transformation comes from the system, and the system comes from the transformation, because without a vision, you're not going to have any desire to make those systems change. And if you make a system change just to have a system change without that vision, then what's the point, right? And I think being in education, and we're all educators and mental health professionals, or whatever that was, and whoever everybody is on that poll, we all have a desire to make those changes and make things a little bit better, the lives of our children and our communities a little bit better. But we have to be honest with those things. So you look at the lower left, it says the way we really get things done, and the upper right says the way we say we get things done. And if there's a disconnect between those two, I think that leads oftentimes to cynicism, right? We get a little bit cynical about, oh, they're just saying that, right? But this is how we actually get things done. I'll just go in my classroom, I'll close the door, I'll get left alone, and this too shall pass, right? But it's not just teachers doing that. It's administrators doing that. It's superintendents doing that. This too shall pass. If I can last out another what's today's date? To say, if I can last out until February 7th, I get to retire, right? But are we really interested in just getting things done or getting by? Or are we interested in actually getting those things done? So we have to be honest. You got to look at those visions, goals, procedures, policies, strategy, shared value, and success. That's the above ground pieces right there. And we recently started our Cognia. It was a wonderful group of people, but they're a review for our systems change and our accreditation process. And they said, well, what's your mission statement? Where's your strategic plan? Where's all this different stuff? And Jamie Woodward, another genius I get to work with on a daily basis, says she says, oh, we have a superintendent who doesn't believe in that. He just likes to get stuff done. But we do have a vision. Our board's been very strong, and we have built that vision together. It's not just one person doing that. A lot of people think, oh, you're the superintendent, you can just say these things and they'll get done. Well, you could do that, I guess, or you could get a whole lot not done. But when you work with people of the caliber that I get to work with, I would be a fool not to listen to what they have to do and what they have to say. So that goes down to all that stuff underground, the beliefs, the perceptions, the values, the unwritten rules, the stories, the feelings, the norms, the tradition, and the shared assumptions. And how are you going to know any of those things unless you get out there and you build those relationships with your people and understand where they're coming from, the fears that they have, the concerns they have, who in their family is hurting right then. These people matter, right? And I think more than anything else, that's what people want to recognize or be recognized for, is everybody matters, right? Everybody's got something going on in their life. And when you get into a position of leadership, and I would classify all of you as being leaders in that, you got to pay attention to that stuff. And this is actually a very uncomfortable thing for me right now to be on a speech, because if you know me, I do a lot more listening than I do a lot of talking, right? And I think that's important to recognize, right? God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth, as my grandma used to say. And what does he expect you to do more of, or she expects, whatever it is, to do more of? But we got to get in there. We have to understand the traditions. We have to respect traditions, right? You go into a school district, you go into anywhere, they have traditions. They have the way of things done. You may not like it, you may not agree with it, but they're theirs, just like you have yours. There was a terrible story yesterday. I saw this news program. It was out in Goodyear. There was a road rage incident. Somebody got shot. You might have seen this on Channel 3 News or whatever channel I was on at the time. And they were interviewing these guys that lived next door, didn't live next door. They feel like it, but they worked in this tire shop right next to the Circle K where the shooting happened. And one fellow got killed, and they were interviewing this guy, and I said, "Wow, that's probably the wisest thing I'd ever heard anybody ever say." And he said, "These people out there getting arguments all the time, just driving around. And if they would just stop and take a minute and understand that other person that they have an encounter with, whether it's on the road or somewhere else, they've got a family, they have a life, they have an aspiration. You know what? We all have our bad days. Can't we just keep that in mind?" And I said right there, that guy's a genius. He's changing tires for a living and doing what he's got to do, but he knows what it's all about. That's the beliefs, the perceptions, and that's what we have to have a firm understanding of, and we have to be honest in communicating those desires and those traditions that we have and those unwritten rules. We can't hide things. We can't keep them to ourselves and say, "Oh, I'll just post it on Facebook to show my anger," which happened, just here, last week, right? It doesn't do anybody any good. But let's have those conversations one-on-one, or however we go about that. Does that help with the invisible culture versus the visible culture? Where do you want your organization or your life to be? Visible or invisible categories? And I think the invisible should be driving the visible, of course. All right. What's
Yes, and thank
on,
you,
Leslie?
I don't, you know what? I don't have,
I can't see it.
14.
Oh, we're on 14. Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that too. And I think you did a wonderful job of explaining this. And I absolutely love this slide. A lot of times in education, we get these shiny new initiatives and
Right.
we get these new programs, and it's been the MO of in education that we slap these on. We say, "Hey, guess what? This is what we're doing this year." And we talk about some of those visible pieces. We talk about those things about, okay, what are our goals around this new initiative? That becomes that's our checklist. So we go, okay, we've checked that off. We put those structures in place. Check, check, check. And then we wonder, a year, 2 years down the road, why didn't that work? Why did that fail? And, we go in those loops, and that has just been the way it's always been. because we're not getting down into, okay, what's underneath that? Look at all these things. We never considered the culture of our community. We never considered their traditions. We never considered individual values. We never considered biases that people might have, their stories. Let's drill down. That's where we're going to create this sustainability for so many of our initiatives that we have. So, yeah, so thank you for doing a wonderful job of explaining that graphic. And we're going to move into just some other things that, as we're looking at this big picture of systems change, a few other things that we might want to consider. And the first one is looking at this whole school, whole community, whole child, whole culture model. And some of you are probably familiar with this. If you want to scan that QR code, you can get a little bit more information about it. But just as we don't bring our career selves, just our career selves to our sites each day when we walk in the door, our students don't just bring their academic selves either. So we are whole people. We don't leave that behind just because we walk in the doors of an institution. Our kids don't either. It's just so important that we address the aspects of whole child. And I love that they added that whole culture piece as well, which was not initially there. So this has been updated to include that whole culture piece as well. And this graphic, I think, and I apologize because it's a little bit hard to see. Some of the print's going to be a little bit small on your end, especially depending on the size of the screen you're on. This was created by the National Training and Technical Assistance Center. And it's just a fantastic look at, if we're looking at creating systems and cultures that center and serve our staff, students, and family in order for them all to feel seen and heard. And that's some, that's come up multiple times already, is making sure that we are making our adults and our students feel seen and heard. What are all the pieces that we need to look at for the journey? And so you can take a look at this and see, like, okay, in the educational system, we're probably going to need to consider MTSS, right? We're probably going to need to consider those multi-tiered systems of support. We're probably going to need to consider social emotional learning, trauma-informed or trauma-responsive practices. We want to make sure we're including those because we need to ensure that there is a foundation of being safe. And so you can see in equity, wellness, and then there's that little trash can over in the left-hand corner of maybe some things that you want to get rid of, you want to leave behind. So it's got a nice little trash can there of things that you can say, you know what, we don't need these things, let's leave those behind. But as you go, and there's little guideposts too on your journey, whose voices are missing from this conversation? And why are those voices missing? Let's take a look at that. So, and are our actions healing the historical intergenerational trauma? How are you centering the work of Black, Indigenous, and people of color? What are your values? So all of these little pieces are resources distributed equally. This little map, I think you could spend probably half an hour really looking at this and saying, okay, as we do this, as we take this journey, what pieces do we as a site, what pieces would we need to consider and pull in? What things would we need to leave behind? Steve, is there anything you want to add on this graphic?
Just had to take off my mute button. No, I think there's a lot there. I did spend a lot of time in there as well, but it just shows you there's nothing easy. You're looking at a map. Oh Lord, who's got the map, right? On the when you're there, it's going to be different for everybody in every place.
Yeah. So another thing you probably want to consider is, we know that a lot of times in schools, work is being done in kind of siloed ways. So we've got our teams, we've got a team over here doing work on social emotional learning. Maybe it's a curriculum, maybe it's a program, and maybe it's a team that works on that on Tuesdays. And then we have a team that's working over here on some trauma responsive and working to make that happen. Then we have a team that's working on restorative practices. So this model is just one way, this PRISM model. And if you want more information on that, you can scan the QR code. It's one way that you can see that all of these really can be integrated, and they can all be integrated in a multi-tiered systems approach. And also bring in some of the foundations of the neurosequential model as well. And you don't have to, but these are using what you already have in place in your school systems to make it work for you and in a cohesive, comprehensive way. So that outside green tier is the tier 1, the yellow is the tier 2, and then we've got red as tier 3. And you can see that on the outside in the purple, all of it is set within a foundation of regulation and relationships, which is really the foundation of where everything starts from. And then we have equity that is woven through the spokes. So equity, kind of the foundation of all of it as well. And so then we want to move into, okay, so we've got all of these considerations as we're looking at making some change in our systems. Well, let's look at, well, what's working out there? Because we really want to see, okay, probably some people are doing this work. Let's use some of that to assist our process. So the first thing that I want to bring to your attention, this is a really fabulous resource. This is the Leadership Competencies for Learner-Centered Personalized Education. This was developed in 2017 by the Council of Chief State School Officers and Jobs for the Future. And it's designed to be used as a companion to the Educator competencies. And I'll show you those on the next slide. So if you scan this QR code here, this is going to get you the leadership competencies. And this model really revolves around building on students' needs and interests, emphasizing agency, calling out the relational aspects of learning, and prioritizing equitable application. And most of the foundational competencies of this framework include establishing a culture of safety and growth mindset, where leaders and educators, students feel safe to voice their opinions, where they feel safe to assume agency for their own teaching and their own learning. So, and it pulls in, this framework pulls in elements of social emotional learning, restorative practices, culturally responsive practices, and a trauma responsive culture. So again, it's really what you saw in that last graphic. It's pulling in all those pieces into this framework with very specific ways to go about it. And on this next slide, I will show you the educator competencies. And these were actually revised in 2020, right around the time of the pandemic. So they are pretty updated, and it goes over these 4 domains. And again, those themes of equity, inclusion, social emotional learning, those are really woven throughout each of these domains: the intrapersonal, the interpersonal domain, the cognitive domain, and the instructional. This is all free too. And so if you're interested in getting more about these frameworks, you can just scan those QR codes on there. And now let's go ahead and take a look at Finland, because Finland's doing some things right. And we've got to look at Finland when we're looking at systems change. And I'll let Steve take it over from here.
Thank you, Leslie. Yeah, I get real excited about Finland. Someday I'm going to tour there, probably hopefully in the summertime. Finland and Iceland, all those places like that. And I'm sure it's been beat to death. You all are familiar at least a little bit with Finland, with what they did. But the first thing with Finland is they took the first step, and they always say the first thing you got to do is you got to recognize you got a problem, right? What is there an issue? And Finland did that 35 years ago. They had the worst measure of their education system. And they said, well, this is not quite working very well. So what are we going to do about it? And so somehow they came together and they found agreement on what they wanted to see as a country and as a society, what they wanted their kids to have once they left school, and what the purpose of schools were and how they were going to help their kids. So if you look at the parallel, and we've been, and just to let you know, in full disclosure, I've spent 20 of those 30 years that you pointed out have been in education in charter schools. So I've started some charter schools. I've worked in a lot of charter schools. I don't have any problem with the choice. I don't necessarily have any problem with accountability. None of those things. But the question is really, are our schools, is our system, right? I think individual schools, everybody likes their schools and everybody's doing okay with them. But is our system really meeting the needs of children for the future going forward? Are those policies that are coming out from those policymakers reflecting that? Is there a general consensus on the purpose of schools and the purpose of education in general? Or is there a disconnect between those two? So if you look in the United States, the last 30 years, it's all been about accountability and choice. And even in Arizona, and I get to ask that question, how do you feel about ESAs? And I said, I don't have any problem with competition, but let's maybe level some playing fields here, and let's look out for all kids, right? But the United States, of course, is focused on increasing standards and accountability measures. And I was asked that question the other day about standards. Have we dumbed down our standards? And the way that I answered that question to this community member was, when I was in high school, and I went to Moon Valley High School in northern Phoenix, grew up in the West Side, suburban, the whole thing, and I had to take algebra, right? And back then, you only had to have 1 year of algebra in order to graduate from high school. And I will say that it took me more than 1 year to do that 1 year of algebra for a lot of reasons. But you only needed 1 year. Now you have to have 4 years of mathematics, including Algebra 1, geometry, either a pre-calc or Algebra 2, and then a subsequent math class. I don't think it's a matter of the standards. But I think for some, it has been, for a while, all I heard was every kid goes to college. Well, I think we're finally starting to understand the redefinition of college, right? College can be a lot of different things to a lot of different kids. And the kids that I see in our community, post-secondary options for them will not necessarily be the university, but either a community college or a vocational training of some kind. I'm very much an advocate for vocational training. I do believe in the power of work in transforming children's lives. I hope we're going to get there someday. But we've also, the second bullet says prescriptive content-based curriculum. Great. Okay. I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. I don't think that we're getting a whole lot of knowledge building out there, and we're seeing a change in that as well. You know, the science of reading, if you're familiar with the science of reading, we're making a big steps in that in our school district as well. But also that content knowledge, becoming aware, being curious. And kids are naturally curious. Let's feed that and let's use that. And the last one is the focus on accountability through national, state, and district achievement tests. In Finland, I think they give one test, and that's at the end. But they also don't have a 6,000 person shortage of teachers. They've invested in their teachers, and they've built these teacher cadres. They realize it starts there, a qualified, highly effective teacher in every classroom for every kid. And they built every school in Finland with the identical opportunities for those kids. Holy cow, wouldn't that be terrific? Teachers have to go through a master teacher training program where they if you don't know about it, you should look it up. It's absolutely fascinating what they've done. But these are highly respected professionals, and they paid them that way, right? And so people are being attracted into that profession that may from other professions, but they prioritize. And as we all know, the key teaching and education is the foundation of all the other professions, and they've been doing great. So if you look at Finland, focus on student well-being in all of its facets. Clearly stated vision of target abilities to function in society rather than specific content knowledge. That sounds like, you know, finding out what the kids are interested in and maybe a talent or an avocation for something. And then focus on the creation of shared vision in the curriculum and school policy. No national achievement test. They do take that. I think it's the NAEP. I could be wrong about that. And they consistently outscore every single country. Another thing, and I'm just going to add this, is if you don't know about Iceland, take a look at what Iceland has done with their teens. You talk about child well-being. Just Google how Iceland got its teens to say no to drugs. And it's absolutely fascinating as well. So did you have anything on that slide, Leslie, or did that pretty much cover it?
Nope, I think that was it.
Okay, recruit talented teachers and train them well and give them autonomy. So often what we're seeing right now is I will be the first to admit, we have 110 teachers in our district, and about 20% of them are either uncertified or undercertified, provisional cert. And I'm not saying that they can't be excellent teachers, but what I'm saying is that it is very difficult to recruit those teachers, at least to our community. we're seeing a shortage. I think there was one graphic I saw on a conference one time of Arizona in the middle, and then you had California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico, and all of them paid more on average than Arizona. I don't think it's all about pay. I think the big thing is that common vision, but I think the vision drives our priorities and what we value within our schools and with our communities and with our children. So we want to recruit the most talented teachers. We want to train them well, and we want to give them that autonomy within their classroom to be the ones that are responsible for their children and then working with their families. School days are shorter and teachers spend few hours in classroom instruction. 55% of teachers, U.S. teachers, right? So in our district, we did away with homework. I got to make just a decision last year, and I did away with homework, mandatory homework for K through 6. And I'm not saying this is the reason for it, but when the test scores and the letter grades came out, we had not seen such high letter grades in the past. But I will say the real effect that I got from all these parents calling me saying, thank you. Now we can spend time together as a family instead of fighting over whatever it is that they were fighting on. And that has happened countless times. There's no more homework here. Focus on what's important with the time that you have those children. The superfluous stuff would go away. But if you look at the mandates that are coming down, and I will say this, we are under extreme pressure in school districts and schools everywhere across the state and probably across the country to meet all of these mandates that are coming down from on high. And that makes it very, very challenging to meet the needs of all, or even the many. Give students rights and agency over their own learning. Yeah, makes sense. Everybody likes to have that sense of autonomy and agency. Align school and social support services. You talked about, I heard Shamari say during the opening, all these silos building up. But I'll also tell you that, yeah, that sounds great, but there are institutional obstacles to creating those shared services. I got a fire truck going by here. You hear that? But it requires persistence in having those conversations and a willingness. And the one thing that I am good at is I am a pest. And I think if it's for the good of our students, then I will pester people until we're done. No assigned homework, of course, no standardized testing. And students spend 4 hours a day in school. But what are they doing the other 20 hours? I want to know, right? Because I'll tell you, if kids weren't in school in my community, they'd be at home on their Xboxes, on their cell phones. A lot of them would be challenged in finding activities if they had 20 hours a day to spend, because many of our children, the majority of our children now are coming from single parent or no parent families. They're out there working, trying to make a living, and schools have replaced in many ways. I'm not happy about this. I'm not proud of it. I'm not bragging on it, but in many ways we have taken up those hours that were spent with their families. And we have adopted the Icelandic model of the after-school programs. Read about it, and we've got a lot of those programs. But if they're not in school, they're going to be doing something. So let's figure out what that is, and let's prioritize what they have and what we have in our communities. So is that all right, Leslie? Or yes, Leslie?
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds great.
I keep wanting to call you Dr. Anway. All right. Systems change through the locus of control and trauma responsive lenses. And this is, I'm continuing, correct?
I'll take it over right after this. Yep. All right. So looking at, first of all, focusing on, so here's that graphic again. We've got that graphic, but what of these pieces are in your locus of control? Because as we know, you can maybe look at policies and you go, well, that's not really my thing. So we've got a couple polls that we're going to do right now. And the first one, so Sandy, if you want to go ahead and launch that first poll, the first one is going to be, which of these components of system change feels like it's most critical right now? So which one? Policies, practices, resource flows, relationships and connections, power dynamics, and mental models. Which one feels like it's most critical? Getting a lot of relationships and connections. Few policies, practices, some resource flows, few in the power dynamics. Mental models, and mental models is one we didn't really go into a whole lot, but you know, that includes some of those pieces underneath, some of those things we kind of touched on, you know, the underlying, if we've got biases that have been unaddressed, things like that in there. But certainly also mental models can be, are you trauma responsive? That can be, is your system trauma responsive? Have you made a move towards that as well? So you can see definitely the majority here, it looks like we've got relationships and connections, because really so much comes down to relationships. All right, so that feels like it's most critical. We're going to do another poll right now. And which one feels like it's most within your own personal locus of control? Which one of these? Conditions of systems change. Sandy, did you launch that second poll?
Leslie, I put it, and I apologize, I put 2 questions in the same poll.
Oh, you
if you
did.
scroll-
Okay.
Yeah, so if you scroll down, people are answering that second question.
Okay. All right.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. Okay, so which component feels like it's most within your own personal locus of control? Again, relationships is coming up. So that one feels like it's most within what your own sphere of influence, things you can influence, things you can control, mental models as well, practices, policies for some people as well, resource flows, probably not so much, power dynamics, not as much. All right. Let me go ahead and share those results so people can see those. Okay, so let's go ahead then and look at, if we're looking at systems change through a trauma responsive lens, then we really need to look at it knowing what neuropsychology tells us about the sequential nature of how the brain processes. We know we've got to look at safety first, which is also Maslow's hierarchy as well. So we've got to look at, okay, safety. For our kids, for our staff, for everybody, we need to look at it through, am I safe? And so when we're looking at systems change through a safety lens, then we need to make sure that we are ensuring that sense of safety or felt safety for everyone first. And so, Steve, I'll let you talk about this one as we look at some of the keys to safety and also really what does safety mean?
Got to keep moving that around so I can see. Keys to safety: resilient educators, resilient students, emotionally regulated adults and youth. So that word regulated, right? I know it's becoming much, much more, but even a couple, 3 years ago, you didn't hear it as used as ubiquitously as it is now in talking with children and even with adults. And I know that much of what gets to my desk are oftentimes dysregulated adults, not too many of the dysregulated children, but certainly the dysregulated adults. And so if you look at those keys to safety, it's not just about the educators and the students, the emotionally regulated adults and youth, it's everybody combined into this. And this is not the proudest moment of my career, but I will tell you that back during the pandemic, about 2 years ago, I was in the hospital over here in Cottonwood, and they had a giant sign. And when you first walked in the door, and I'm sure you've seen these around because I've seen them other places, that says basically a behavior code for how you're supposed to act when you're in the hospital. And if you don't, then these are the bad things that are going to happen to you, you know, up including working with law enforcement. And I saw that and I said, because we'd seen a recent spat of people coming into our front offices of our schools, and mostly, actually all dysregulated adults, and usually parents or something else. coming in and being very disrespectful, and certainly not making our front office people feel safe, and creating that front office environment where everyone is going to feel welcome and safe, but actually the opposite of that. And I call it, when I take tours of people on tour, I say it's a sign of the times, right? It's a sad sign of the times is what it is more than anything else, that I need to remind people to not be verbally, emotionally, or physically abusive to staff members. It's the same thing for people in the hospital. These are caring, the two greatest professions in my mind are teachers and nurses. And no offense to any other profession, but that's the basis of all the caring and the compassion that we should have in this country. Yet oftentimes they've taken the brunt of that. So we've taken a hard line against that in our schools, because while I do recognize that there are a lot of challenged people out there, my two favorite words are so what? What are you willing to do about it? And what you're willing to do about it is go in and verbally abuse a staff member who's doing the best they can, not making a whole hell of a lot of money. That is not okay in our schools, because we are trying to keep our schools safe and creating those environments where everyone can feel safe. So what is safety? I think that's probably a little bit different for everybody else, but as you see over here, this graphic that just came flying in, Leslie, it was a very nice effect there. Brick parents, secure bases, safe havens, cultural safety, physical safety, relational safety, moral safety. I think that one's interesting, right? Emotional and psychological safety, and internal safety. And that is going to be different for everybody coming through. And when safety and trust increase, I'm sorry, I got to keep moving. I don't have a big enough screen on my increase, threat, fear, and danger decrease. But you know what also increases when safety and trust increase in schools? Learning increases. Happy kids, feeling safe kids are kids that are going to be learning. If they have any kind of sense of danger, where they're coming from, and oftentimes they bring those dangers and those fears and those concerns with them into the schoolhouse. We can't do anything about that necessarily. But when they get there, we can create those conditions. And Martha Horton is a wonderful person who creates those conditions within the school and help create those conditions where those kids feel safe enough and calm enough and happy enough that they can go back and learning. But this is a very, very intentional process. I know that you've got something here that you'd like to say on this particular slide, Leslie. Is that accurate?
I don't.
Oh, well, I get to keep talking then.
Yep.
But all those different aspects, the moral safety and everything, I'd like to talk about that moral safety and what that actually means. And I know that we've got some time for some questions up there, but that's a question that I have. Moral safety. What is moral safety? I'm just curious what that means to you. And maybe we can come back to that at some point. I don't want to, I guess I used to teach, so I don't want to give you the answer. I don't think there is any one answer to that question, but I think it's very intriguing that it's on there. Emotional, psychological, we can understand. Internal, yes. Relational, of course, and physical. So let's go to the next slide if we can, please. Thank you, Miss Leslie. All right. Effective multitasking is not a thing. I get told that on a daily basis by all the people around me, because I like to get about 20 different things going at any given time. All it does is create more stress. Did you have something on this? I'm trying to figure out what slide we're on, Miss Leslie.
We are on slide 28.
Okay, gotcha. So let's go to slide 29. We got to pick up the pace a little bit. And being busy is not a badge of honor. As you said earlier, we're human beings, not human doings. And I think I get lost in that too. Hey, at least I'm busy, but are you really being effective? And I think that's something to keep in mind, because I think it can cause more stress, less safety, and of course, less resilience because of that. Next one.
All right, so let's look at reframing resilience then. So by looking at it from a, not about you, how you endure, but how you recharge. And Harvard Business Review did a really wonderful article on this a while back, because yes, we know that resilience involves that working hard, it involves grit, it involves some emotional intelligence, but it also requires you to stop, like we did today. It requires you to stop, to pause, to be present, and it requires you to recharge your batteries, because if you really want to build resistance, you've got to create those internal resources to give you that ability to recover. We know that we have our brains are being bombarded by thousands of thoughts every day. The average person looks at their phone 150 times a day. So if you think about that, if each phone look took only 1 minute, that would account for 2.5 hours of every day. So even that, so you can think about trying to eliminate some of your phone checks, and you can maybe build in some moments of pause and presence instead. and to build in some moments of recharge. So another thing is looking at a locus of control. So a locus of control is, we looked at it in a kind of a different lens on a previous slide, but typically people fall between internal locus of control or an external. But a lot of times it's kind of a mix between the two. And a lot of times it's situational. A lot of times you can kind of fluctuate between the two on a daily or even hourly basis where you're falling in this. But for the most part, if you have more of an inclination towards an internal locus of control, typically you feel like you've got a little bit more of control of things that are happening around you, that it's not just this luck or random chance that these things happen to me because of fate or something. And so if you have this more of this internal locus of control, a lot of times you feel like you have the ability to make change happen. So you can start shifting, when you become aware of it, that locus of control thinking to a little bit more of that internal, I've got control over this. It's not fate. It's not some luck and random chance that is controlling my own trajectory. And then also looking at the stress response system, because right now we know that all of our stress response systems are sensitized. It is what it is. We've just been through a pandemic. Steve mentioned this earlier. We've got parents, we have adults, we have teachers in the system. Everyone's stress response systems are sensitized. Of course, our kids' stress response systems are sensitized, but when our adults' stress response systems are sensitized and they're trying to deal with things that are happening in the school system, it's just going to exacerbate problems. So becoming aware that our stress response patterns have shifted is really important. So we know that when events that happen in our lives are more predictable, when they're moderate, when they're controllable, that is going to lead to this sense of tolerance or resilience. That's our ideal world. But when things are unpredictable, they're extreme, they're prolonged, that's when we get this sense of sensitization. That's what most of us are dealing with right now, is from the pandemic. We had this, a lot of this was outside of our locus of control. We had no control over, when is the pandemic going to end? Well, has it really ended? You know, I mean, all these things that are happening, are we going to go hybrid? Are we not? So if we can take some of those events in our lives and try to shift them from the unpredictable to the predictable. So yes, I don't have control over all the political things that are happening in my country, but do I have the power to shut the news off? Yes, I do. So I can shift that, because that's impacting my stress levels. That's impacting my ability to be resilient. So I'm going to shift that, knowing that's kind of outside of my locus of control. I'm going to shift that into that more predictable, moderate, controllable range just by turning off the news. So knowing, if you can even make a list of some of these events and try to shift them into that moderate, predictable, controllable category, you can do this with students as well. It can be really effective. So let's do our first Mentimeter here. So if you want to scan that QR code with your phone, and let's look at what are some things that you can do to recharge in your work setting. This is not at home. I can go take a hike, because that's fabulous if you can go do that. This is what can you do in your work setting to recharge your battery. We'll give you a little time to scan that, and then we'll take a look at some of those results. Okay, so we have, just stand up and take a few breaths. sometimes that works wonders. Use the PTO. Yeah, that's a great idea. Go for a short walk outside, because even though you're not at home, you can still go for a short walk outside, do a breathing exercise, drink some water, meditate. If that works for you, you can meditate, you know, in your work environment, drink water, take a walk, close my office door, listen to music, just sitting quiet. Quiet works wonders. Silence is a wonderful regulator for the brain. Take a 5-minute pause, listen to calming music. Yeah, Angie?
Can you scroll back up to the QR code? I didn't have time to get it, so I could put it in the chat in Whova, please. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Anthony. Take breaks throughout the day. I think that's really critical. So it's not just, okay, I'm going to take like one time in my day to do a little bit of regulation, but really it's making sure that you're doing it more regularly. So because you can take 2 minutes. Take 2 minutes at 10 o'clock or, you know, when you need to just do just a little bit of, whether it's breathing, just whatever it is, 2 minutes, and then 2 minutes again, maybe right before lunch or right after lunch. So scheduling those regular, that's really the critical thing. Be welcoming, can be recharging. Mindful breathing, walk around the building, talk to a trusted coworker can be really recharging for you, because it's that relational connection. Sit in the sun and in silence. Yeah, and the sun too. The sun's very recharging. Coffee and tea breaks. Eat lunch in quiet. Yeah. Listen to calming music. An essential oil diffuser. Eat a snack, get a drink, do artwork. Focus on gratitude instead of focusing on what's outside of my control. Yeah, because that's where our mind tends to go, is to those things. Our mind tends to go to, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, all these things that are not in ours. So yes, if we can rein our minds back into, okay, but what is actually in my locus of control? And then what am I thankful for? Yeah. Make a cup of tea, sit for a couple minutes, put headphones on so there's no outside noise, take a breather, check in with a coworker. Fabulous. So thank you all for sharing all of these things. It sounds like you have some good ideas for ways to recharge in the work setting. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen again with sound. Right. And as we know, though, so we know that recharge facilitates that sense of felt safety, which is what we're going for, and resilience, but it also primes the brain for learning and teaching and retaining new material. So we know that's really important for our adults. We know that also that recharge is really important for our students when we want them to be in a learning space. But we know, of course, it goes beyond, okay, identifying these things we can do to recharge, because we also need workplace cultures that acknowledge the need for it, provide the time and space for it. So that's kind of this extra component. So let's do another Mentimeter and look at that. So what would help facilitate a culture of encouragement for recharge? Thinking of your own sites. And maybe that's already in place. So maybe you work at a site where they say, you know what, you have the time and the space. If you need it, you go take that time to recharge. And maybe you don't. So what would you need to make that happen? So go ahead and scan that QR code. And then we'll take a look at those results. Okay. Seeing my leaders model self-care. That is really big. When you can get the leaders, whoever they are in your school, if it's the principal, if it's the superintendent, if it's the director, if you are in behavioral health or a youth care agency, seeing them model that for you means, you know what, that's okay. That's okay that we can take time to do it. They're doing it. We can do it. I had a principal who would play the guitar, and he would put a sign on his door outside, and he was saying in session. And he would go in and he would play the guitar. And so what a wonderful thing, because then we knew, okay, that's okay. He needs that time. We can also take that time. It was set, that culture was set from the top. Calming or focus rooms are wonderful. You've got the space to do it. Then you also need the permission and the time to do it. Stop filling teacher time with trainings, right? Sometimes trainings are not the thing, right? Sometimes you just need space and you need time to recharge. Teachers have so much on their plates right now. Encouragement to always take lunches and breaks every day, because most people in the educational system do not. They don't do it. A moment of silence during the announcements. That's fabulous. If you can get everyone to do some type of regulatory activity at the beginning of the day, or restorative circle or something where you are getting everyone regulated together, that's amazing. Blocked out time on our schedules. Yeah, if you can get it built into the actual schedule is amazing. Reminders on my computer throughout the day to recharge. You can, yeah, you can put those reminders on your phone, on your computer to do it. If you're in a space where you can do that, that's great. A universally trained trauma-informed staff. If your entire staff is trauma-informed, they understand the need for everyone to have that recharge space and that time. Supportive administrators who allow the space to recharge, better time management to have that work-life balance. And it's all about seeing others above you, showing it's okay to be vulnerable. Yeah, I love that, because that's what it is. It's demonstrating that ability to be vulnerable and to say, I need that time. I need that space. Okay. And I know that we're kind of running a little short on time. So I love all of these ideas. Getting support to set the change in motion, creating a culture that recognizes, supports this need. I love all these answers that you guys have shared here. This is, I think, the bigger question. So we know that you all have some amazing ways to recharge. I think the bigger question is facilitating this culture of encouragement for recharge. And I think you guys have some good ideas here. And so being able to move forward with some of those. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen again. All right, and Steve, I'm going to let you talk about Inner.
Yeah, I love this one. I think this should be a requirement in every place. I know that some would say my office, I have a couch in my office. That's probably what I use it for. And if we're being completely honest, I could say that, yes, I'm a practitioner of Inner Murray. I'm not sure how you pronounce that or not, but right. I remember when I was in kindergarten, and I went to kindergarten, it was 50 years ago now, I guess. And, you had to bring in a towel, right? Because you'd always have nap time. Remember that, Leslie? I don't know if you remember that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
What happened to that? Right? What happened to those pauses and those moments? You talk about silence, and I love music. Music is one of my favorite things in the whole world. But I need silence anymore. When I'm driving down the road, I find myself most of the time not listening to anything, trying, finding those moments of silence and those moments of quiet. I think quiet is very, very underrated, and I think we probably could use a lot more of this in the world, and especially with all the everybody, and I was going to say kids, but everybody on the devices, and we even do it in our own schools, right? Get on the computer, you got the sound, put the earphones on, the whole thing. We don't help ourselves any, but taking those moments to just be, right? And with your own thoughts. But I think for some, maybe their own thoughts are a little bit scary, right? It's kind of a scary place to go to when you have silence. They have to fill up the unforgiving minute with distraction. But I think it's more needed and vital now than ever. So I'm a huge proponent of Ina Marie of sleeping at work. Just don't tell my school board that I am, please.
So yeah, this is this takes place in Japan, and not only is this considered acceptable, it's also one of the ways they can show their dedication to work, because it means that they have worked carefully and diligently and they feel really tired. So that's what, by napping at work, it means they have really showed careful, diligent attention to their work.
I will share that with our board as well.
There you go.
Work it out.
I'm sure they'll be on board. All right, we just want to share this tool with you as well. If you're interested, you can scan that QR code. This is a tool you can use to assess your own levels of resilience. So if you want to look at, okay, well, where am I at right now with my own levels of resilience? This looks at some of the internal factors. It looks at self-control, self-confidence, and then some of these external factors as well. So you can scan that. It was created by Dr. Amit Sood, who is the Executive Director of the Global Center for Resiliency and Wellbeing. And then our final part, we want to look at systems change through a trauma responsive lens and move up that sequential brain related sequence. And so we're looking now at the limbic system, and we're looking at that piece of, okay, if we've covered, am I safe? Have we set that tone for safety? Then we want to move into the relational piece. Am I loved? Because all of us in a work setting, in any settings, we want to feel like we are safe and that we belong. So we want to look at that and look at creating some intentional connection building opportunities, because we know the research on connection and belonging is really clear. And this quote from Dr. Perry, your history of connectedness is a better predictor of your health than your history of adversity, certainly is apropos here. Here is the research behind all of this. So if you want to scan, there's quite a bit, 4 different QR codes. But also this book by Jeffrey Cohen just came out. It's brand new out. A whole book on belonging and the science of creating connections and bridging divides. And I just got it, so I can't say I've read it yet. But I read a lot of the pieces behind it. Jeffrey Cohen is a social psychologist at Stanford University. He's really conducted a lot of really extensive research on belonging and connection. So I just encourage you to look into that if you're interested. And then let's quickly hear from Brene Brown on what belonging is not.
We are in the midst of what I would call a political and social shit show right now. It's a cultural nightmare. It is. And we want belonging in the midst of this thing, right? But let me tell you what belonging is. The opposite of belonging from the research is fitting in. That's the opposite of belonging. Fitting in is assessing and acclimating. Here's what I should say, be. Here's what I shouldn't say. Here's what I should avoid talking about. Here's what I should dress like, look like. That's fitting in. Belonging is belonging to yourself first, speaking your truth, telling your story, and never betraying yourself for other people. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And that's vulnerable.
So when we were looking at those Mentimeters and somebody brought up being vulnerable, that plays right in with that. So that piece of belonging, connection, it is not fitting in. It's that ability to be vulnerable. And Steve, I'll let you talk about these 4 keys to real connection, and then we'll go ahead and wrap it right up.
All right. Well, I'm just, I think I should have watched that video before. I would have had the green light to cuss then, like Brene Brown. I think that's a good thing. But people are hard to hate close up, right? And it goes back the whole thing. Don't send the email. Go and see and sit across from the person. It's a lot more difficult to be crappy to somebody if you're sitting right across from them. All of a sudden, your keyboard courage goes away. Speak truth, but be civil, of course. Why can't we be civil? You know, there's that whole thing in civil discourse right now, wherever. No one's your enemy. no one hates you for what you are, what you think you are, and you shouldn't hate them for what they are too. We're all just trying to do the best that we can, and we deserve to give each other a break. Like that guy said, we're all trying to live our lives the best that we possibly can. And just because you think you're right and they're wrong doesn't necessarily mean that that is the case. Hold hands with strangers, right? Hold hands with strangers. I was in France last week, or not last week. I wish it was last week, last summer. And I saw these little kids when they go on field trips. You know what they do? They hold hands. They got their little buddies, and it's just the cutest damn thing. And I wish that we'd have a little bit more of that come around. Strong back, soft front, and wild heart. I'll let you take that one, Leslie. That's an interesting one.
Well, if you've looked into Brene Brown at all, she talks a lot about wild heart, about having a wild heart. And so it's about having a spine, so being able to stand up when you need to, but having a soft front. So being able to be vulnerable, be compassionate, be able to connect with other people, but still stand up when you need to, and having a wild heart. So just being able to throw yourself, be in the arena, like you've said, Steve, throw yourself in when you need to be in the arena. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and move into, we're going to end it with this little quote. And that's, change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We're the change that we seek.
Leslie, you're terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful to everything. So, and it's very nice to see you all. And hopefully we'll see you again soon in person someday. That'd be real nice.
Thank you both so much. It's always amazing to sit and listen to the two of you talk about these topics. So we really appreciate your time and sharing your expertise today.